Hello, I'm back. I tried it with the curtains open, but look, I sort of disappear. So we're going to have to use this, I'm afraid, my lovely antique gold curtains. Right, so we're going to move on to another kind of observation now, which is, let me get them in the right order, covert participant observation. So I'm looking at page 44 in your booklets. Covert participant observation. Now you could almost put Lord Humphreys, the delightful Lord Humphreys, in this group, because he was he participating or not? Arguably by acting as the lookout and voyeur, he was indeed participating. I'll leave you to decide on that. So covert participant observation, let's get our heads around this. You are joining in, you're participating with your sample, but they don't know it. It's covert. My God. Can I just again apologise for my hair? It is like a bale of hay strapped to my head. That's lockdown chic, I'm afraid. Oh, and here, Birdie, come on then. Come on then. Come. Goodness sake, the dog's getting involved. Right. So you're watching your sample, but they don't know you're watching, and you're participating with them. Now, again, this is quite hard to pull off, really. There are two videos I'd like you to watch. I mean, actually, if you can look up as well, I don't know if it's in your textbook, James Patrick and the Glasgow Gang. That's a good example of this, where someone joins a kind of knife gang in Glasgow, which obviously fraught with problems. But the other two videos that I'd like you to watch, well, certainly one of them, it's called Undercover Teacher. I can't remember if I showed you a bit of this at the start of the year, but if you put into Google video search, Dispatches, Undercover Teacher, you'll get it. It's in 6 parts, I think. Watch as much or as little of it as you fancy, but it is really interesting. You might recognise the woman in it, Alex Dolan. She was a supply teacher who wanted to uncover what really goes on in Britain's state schools and how little resources there are, how bad the behaviour can be, and how tough it is for teaching comprehensives. And there's no doubt in some comprehensives, it's super tough to work there. And she's trying to uncover some of the problems by going in as a supply teacher. And she's got kind of really cool bum belt on with hidden cameras in it. She must put them in other places as well, because sometimes it's hard to work out. But anyway, she's setting up hidden cameras, which of course is risky in itself because you risk being uncovered. But she goes into a variety of schools, one of whom is going through Ofsted, and has it on in the classroom, but also you'll see in the teaching staff room and in toilets, talking to people about the standard Ofsted technique for schools, which is sending all your little monkeys out on a really exciting trip to the zoo that day. So she's really not putting these schools in a very good light. Now, ultimately, actually, she gets struck off the teaching register. She's done all right, mind. She's now the weather girl on Look East. Curly hair. You might recognise her. Have a look, have a look. If you live around this area, you might recognise her. Okay, so please can you watch that? The other one you might watch is McIntyre Undercover. Now, this is a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant documentary, but made by Donal McIntyre, who you may also recognise. After making this, so basically he went undercover to find out about a group I mentioned in the last video, which is the Chelsea Headhunters, who are a really hardcore, unpleasant group of football hooligans. I mean, being football hooligans is probably bottom of their list. They are racist, they're Nazis, they're a thoroughly unpleasant unit, very dangerous. And he manages to infiltrate this group. You can only imagine how hard that is. And you'll see the lengths he has to go to, like getting a Chelsea tattoo, moving in next to this guy, Jason Marino, who's one of the gang. He also is in a car with hidden cameras and so dangerous to this bunch of psychos. And this guy who is nicknamed Nightmare and lives up to it, reveals on camera that he slit a policeman's throat and goes to prison for it. Now you can imagine that straight after that, a price was put on Donal McIntyre's head and he had to go into hiding with his family. So the risks of this kind of observation, particularly if you're looking into a bunch of lunatics, are high. So ethically, that's incredibly dangerous. Have a look at that if you can. So it's called Donal McIntyre Undercover, the Chelsea Headhunters. The only problem is the only copies I've ever seen of it on telly are either in an unidentified as yet language, well, by me unidentified, or really poor quality and the lip syncing goes out. So if you can watch it, do. You may struggle to find it, but it is well worth sitting through. There's one copy of it, I think it's called Better Copy on Google Videos, and it's it sounds like it's in a foreign language to start with. Well, it is in a foreign language to start with, but ultimately the foreign languages and subtitles, and you can hear the English behind it, so it's worth persevering with that. Have a watch of them and think about some of the pros and cons. I'll just highlight a couple. You can see on page 44 there's kind of space to comment on it as ever. Using these key terms, you must use validity for stay-in, reliability, researcher effect, the Hawthorne effect, or the marks will be low. You have to use the key concepts. So in theory, covert participant observation is going to be the very, very highest in both validity and for stay-in. It is literally taking a walk in the shoes of the people that you are observing, but is fraught with difficulties. But certainly if you pull it off, it can be very, very high in the stay-in and ecological validity. Some obvious problems with it: ethics, very poor. No informed consent, there is deceit, you may cause long-term harm and distress, particularly if you put it on telly like Donal McIntyre did. Clearly it's not reliable, you cannot retest this accurately, it's in no way standardised. Your sample is going to be highly unrepresentative, potentially. You're going to be observing, what, maybe 3, 4, 5 people for months, and it took Donal McIntyre literally months to get in with this group, who are very suspicious of outsiders because they're criminals and all that. And so you're going to have huge amounts of funding. Now, if you're working for an average uni, you may not have that. If you're lucky enough to be working for a TV company, you may have much bigger funding, but of course that's going to affect the validity of it as you try and sensationalise it for viewer figures, etc. Have a look at that and try and fill that in, and we'll come back to it and talk through that. I'm going to stop now and then come back with the last type of observation I want to talk about very briefly, and then we're going to move on to secondary sources. So we're very nearly there, folks. I will see you in a minute. Bye-bye.